Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Poet Speaks podcast. Now, our next guest is a Black multiracial artist and designer with an MFA in writing from Otis College of Art and Design. She's the author of Prayer for Relief and lives in Portland, Oregon. Please welcome to the podcast, Krystle May Statler. Krystle, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, 1000%. I think you're the first guest we've had from Oregon.
Oh, really?
Yes, first guest
Wow.
from Oregon. You know what? I had a job interview in Oregon for like an anchor position in for the ABC News out there, but it just kind of fell through. Tell me what is Oregon even like? You're way out in the west, but you're up towards the kind
Mhm.
of, I don't know, in the west, but you're in the northwest. Was that
Northwest.
the
Yeah. I mean, right now it's raining and it's been raining. So that's a lot of what most of the days look like. We're currently coming out of fake spring, and I think, or I'm hopeful, going into real spring. So the sun kind of peeks out every now and again, but the springs and summers here make the dark days worth it. And I've only been here for about 2 years, and so I'm still acclimating to the seasonal depression and the darkness. But then, soon the sun will stay up, or it will stay light until almost 10 p.m. So it makes for an interesting way to live life, and the weather changing so much or sometimes staying very much the same. And then it changes, creates a different sense of urgency to live. And, when it's raining, you got to go out. And when it's sunny, you definitely have to go out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, I guess. It definitely the seasons, well, first off, seasonal depression, that's a really real thing. And then how the weather creates a sense of urgency that kind of isn't there. But I feel opposite. I feel when it's raining, I just don't want to leave the house. I feel like just staying in. I don't feel like doing much if it's raining. I don't know. Then I get snow. We get snow on the East Coast like crazy. So
Mhm.
the snow's 10 times worse. But all right, that's enough about the weather in Oregon. Well, tell me a little bit about tell me a little bit about now you said Oregon 2 years in. So where did you grow up? And I always like to ask this question, where did you grow up and did writing find you in childhood or did it find you at a later time in life? So tell us about your childhood just a bit.
Yeah, so I was born in Tehachapi, California, which is in the Central Valley in between Lancaster and Bakersfield, more or less. And I lived there through I graduated high school from Tehachapi High, and I used writing then as a way to kind of process my angsty teenage, all the things that happen when you're in high school. But I certainly was always taught that writing, and specifically poetry, had to rhyme and it had to be, like the Walt Whitmans of the world. So I felt very like unencouraged to write freely or to encounter poetry kind of on my own terms. So it wasn't until I was in undergrad that I took a creative writing class, and that class really opened up the kind of the possibility that I could really do whatever I wanted. And that while there are these, canonized writers, that's one way, but it's not the way. And so I think through my experiences as a child, I'm the second eldest on my mom's side and the second eldest also on my dad's side. And so had a lot of responsibility as an elder sibling. I didn't really have anybody to guide me through what life looks like or really have any kind of mentorship. So I just kind of had to figure it out on my own. And so I utilized journaling as well as a way to really cope with life and talk kind of only to myself, because as an elder, folks are looking up to you and want you to have the answers. And I wanted to have the answers. So I used journaling as a way to really navigate what that role and responsibility was like. And then just kind of through college, undergrad, and then into grad school, just really exploring like what kind of work speaks to me, what kind of canonized writers actually resonate with the kind of topics that I'm interested in. Namely, I mean, I guess not because of, but grief is certainly a top 5 topic for me.
Mm.
And I think when I reflect back on what childhood was like, I learned kind of quickly, or maybe just because of the nature of what my family situation was like, is there's not a lot of time for you to sit down and write, or reading wasn't really a priority because we had to work, we had to, survive. And all of this is kind of like a luxury now. Whereas when I was growing up with my mom, it was like she was working, 2 jobs. I was staying home from school to babysit my younger siblings. So it wasn't like there was just all this time to imagine or to encounter reading. So it was really in adulthood that I fell in love with writing and reading and words and the ability to communicate what one can feel, but sometimes there's not words, and sometimes there are. And so something that definitely drives me to poetry, because you have a lot of, well, what I've learned is that you have a lot of freedom in what you can do.
Absolutely. You make such a good point. I remember having this conversation with someone earlier this week that time is just a luxury that a lot of us marginalized people do not get, right? The more I feel like the more privileged you are, the more time that you actually have. Because, as marginalized people, your time may be filled with labor, emotional, domestic, et cetera. But also your time is also filled with just this idea of trying to survive. Like so much of our existence as marginalized people, black people, women, et cetera, is just trying to survive in a place where, in a society where your rights are constantly taken in under duress, you're constantly wondering what's next. And that's just, you make such a great point, that idea of just the privilege to even have time to pursue actual life's work is actually just an absolute luxury and privilege in itself. So you kind of dotted in on it, your inspirations. Tell us well, let's dive straight into it. This is your debut poetry collection, Prayer for Relief. Now, in it, you explore your experience in the aftermath of your older brother BJ's murder by the Inglewood Police Department in 2019. And the poems act as tentacles reaching out and attempting to make sense of the nonsensical. Now, tell us a bit about your experience writing. This is your debut, so this is your first ever. Tell us a bit about your experience coming to, I'm sure, that grief, coming to realization, that grief, and coming to the realization and being able to write it down into your art, write it down on paper, and tell us just a bit about the process for how this came together, your debut collection.
Yeah, so my brother was murdered on March 27th, 2019, and my family wasn't notified that he was, as the coroner said, in their inventory until March 30th, which was 3 days that no one knew. And so that day that we found out, uh, etched in my memory for the rest of the time. And the week that followed that was really just a smattering of logistics. Does he get cremated? Do we, move his body to where our dad lived in Missouri? Does our dad come here? Like, it was just all of these logistical elements that ultimately led us to his cremation in Inglewood as well. And after that week of just being deeply entrenched in logistics and not at all having any time to really even think beyond what was right in front of us, because in addition to figuring out all of these things, my partner at the time had been able to get us an interview with the Inglewood Police Department. And so I was able to go in, and instead of being told answers about what happened, I was interrogated as if I was a criminal or as if I did something. And what I later learned, of course, is that the investigators at the time were trying to really find any information to justify why they killed him. And so in experiencing all of that, the only thing I had known how to do is to write. And in those very first couple of weeks of early grief, I was hardly sleeping. I don't even remember if I was eating, but I would wake up in my weird bouts of sleep in the middle of the night and just feel called to write. And so that's what I did. I just wrote. I started writing my brother letters in this notebook that I had kind of tucked away for something special. And sure enough, that became a consistent routine that I was doing. And then, I was taking creative writing classes that were grief specific. Like, I really didn't, there was no way that I couldn't unacknowledge what was happening to my family, within myself, the longing that I had felt. and the dreams that I had had for my brother and I to really reunite, because we were estranged most of our growing up. And so over the last 5 years, it's not as though I wrote thinking I'm writing a book. I am instead writing to understand what doesn't make sense. My family, well, I tried to sue the Inglewood Police Department and was told that I don't have, as a sister, any legal standing, so I was dismissed. Then both of our parents tried to sue them as well, and they made it pretty far onto the case, but ultimately were dismissed as well. So during the time that there was all of this litigation happening, I was the liaison for my parents and the attorney, because both of my parents live in different states. At the time I was living in Inglewood. So I had access to all of the things that were happening, the autopsy report, the depositions, the testimonies, the interview, everything. And we were awaiting trial. And so while all of this was happening, of course, COVID was happening, the trial date kept getting pushed and pushed and pushed. Ultimately, the case settled in December of 2021 out of nowhere. And I think throughout all of this time, all I was doing was trying to understand my grief, trying to understand how did we get here? Certainly having survivor's guilt of, why do I get to be alive and he doesn't? We are biological siblings, and we're the only two within our families that share the same mom and dad. So he's my other, in so much of the way, he's my other half. And so to navigate the world and still feel so much complexity and lack of understanding about my own identity, I had an older brother who was navigating the world too. And if I was to learn anything from anyone, it would be him, because I was in his shadow. So over the last 5 years, it's just been this constant writing and writing. And I used to be in classes and say, like, I just feel like I'm writing the same poem over and over and over again. And I think that's probably true. So last summer, I had finished a poetry program, and at the end of it, the instructor at the time, I had asked her to be my mentor for this particular project. I felt like I had a solid collection of poems. I had been, some of my poems in the work have been published in other zines and publications. So I felt like, okay, let's see what we have here. And after that mentorship meeting and really being able to identify that, wow, there's something here, there's this container that holds, the last 5 years, these 30 poems not only symbolize the age he was, but also it's like it tells so much and so little of the story that really feels resonant to my still continued existence, where I think I know something and then I'm like, I don't, did that memory happen? Am I really sure? Was that a dream? So that's why when they're acting out, the poems acting as tentacles, it's like, it's just a constant reaching. Like I'm always trying to piece together, to make meaning out of something, to pay attention to the numbers and the dates, and it's just a kind of a constant like reverberation of love and grief at all times. And so these poems really serve to, I think, represent the last 5 years and what has happened, what has been learned, what is still unanswerable, and also, I mean, naturally for me, like just what is just deeply unbearable in a loss that is out of order, traumatic, that shouldn't happen to any families. And yet somehow I'm still here and trying to make meaning, continuous meaning out of that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. May your brothers, may he rest in perfect peace. No, that is such a unfortunate thing to happen. Tell us a little bit about, I mean, that is to kind of go through that. It's this idea of, grief. I know, with my own personal loss of family members, relationships, people that have passed. I know grief is so personal to each person, right? Like it's like if someone told you this is what being in love feels like. It's
Mhm.
so different for each person, right? It's like almost like maybe like giving a gift to someone, but it's the gift comes in many different forms. And I remember still when I was preparing for this interview, I had a conversation with a friend of mine many years ago, and it was their dad had passed, and I remember we had talked about, well, what does grief mean? And I remember the person that told me, well, you know, some people they grieve for a week, some people grieve for the rest of their lives. So I kind of want to explore that idea with you. For you now, you said this was 5 years ago, and tell me a little bit about what that experience of grief has felt like, especially that experience with grief and your artistic writing. What is that kind of experience? Like you said, tentacles. You know, you're trying to reach out and make sense of nonsense. I'm sure a lot of it just feels like in certain times, grief can feel like you're reaching into an empty room and just grabbing air and just looking at your hand and nothing. You still haven't grasped anything. What is kind of that feeling been like for you? I mean, grief. I mean, can you even explain it in writing? And can you even give that feeling to someone else? What has that been like processing through your art of poetry, you know, the grief?
This is like the big life question, I
Yeah.
think, for me, because grief is just like you said. And the way I write about it in the book is grief and love are the same verb. And I think that for me, so much of my writing is in a response to rage,
Mm,
that is not otherwise violent, but unjust. I feel bamboozled that my whole life I was never told there is a chance, not that your parents will die. Of course they will die. They will likely die before you, but no one ever gave the warning or even the semblance of a warning that your siblings could go before you and that it could happen tragically or out of order, or and you would have no say. Like, I think that as a child, I was taught that death, specific to your family, happens because of age and sickness and lack of resources, but nothing like this. So I feel a lot of rage at the lack of preparation that the
mm,
elders in my life, could have given me, many of whom also lost siblings. But it's kind of like this secret or something. And so I think that with my own processing, it's really important to me, not only because I feel it every day. 5 years ago doesn't seem like anything, especially when I have these very vivid memories of going to a mortuary and seeing my brother for the very last time. And the time I saw him before that was 5 years prior to that. And we weren't on good terms. Like there are these very specific memories that can't escape me. And in writing, it allows me to go into those places and to understand or try to understand what I was feeling or make sense of this rage. Because just like people didn't warn me my siblings could go before anybody else in my family, I wasn't really taught how to encounter rage or anger. And when he was killed, and when my family found out, that was also the day that Nipsey Hussle was killed. So the media was, or the world, in my sense of understanding the world at the time, was hyper focused on that death, which is tragic in and of itself. And here I am in my own little corner, just like, why isn't my brother's death important? And I feel rage about that. And then of course, in 2020, there's the protest uprising. And it's just this feeling constant of just unjust, and not because other people are getting attention. It's no, they should be. And here's my family, another family who has been ripped apart and told nothing and blamed for these actions that are responsible by other people who are paid millions of dollars, people who undergo training, people, like this industry that's supposed to protect us, and often they do not. And so much of my grief and writing comes from having so much love for my brother, and he's not here to give it to, and also so much rage that I don't want it to translate into violence. I don't want it to translate into hatred. I would rather use this, what seems like a gift that I only really even realized I had after he was killed, because all I knew how to do was write. I want to translate all of these feelings I have inside of me, so that as inevitably there are other families who have lost loved ones to police violence, this story doesn't just become a passing headline or a hashtag or just someone's name that's repeated on Twitter a million times. Like, there's a whole ecosystem around one individual person that,
yeah.
at least for me, will keep me writing about this for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. And it's also this idea of an unjust death, right? You know, your brother BJ, you know, a murder is no small thing. No, that's very powerful though, even in it within itself, what you've been able to kind of create against that rage instead of and turning it into these, you know, flowers for BJ as opposed to
Mhm.
that through your debut. Now tell me a bit about, you know, this idea of a poet's first piece out into the world, first published piece, if you will, a whole collection. How long from when you began writing to now? I mean, how long have you kind of waited, right, to come out with your debut? You know, a lot of people, you know, I've known poets that have waited some 20 years from when their conception of writing or that they could be a poet. They waited 20 years for their debut. Other people within 6 months. How long for you has this been a stretch of time to come to this big moment of your birth as a published poet, if you will?
For a long time, I played the game in publishing, submitting to contests, being rejected time and time and time again. And when I was in grad school for writing, there was a teaching track and a publishing track. So I went the publishing track and I learned to typeset and design books. So I've been designing other people's books for quite a while. And it wasn't only until last year that I really thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself. I'm tired of waiting for the system that is broken to give me a chance or to tell this story, because this story is important. And it's not my story, it's BJ's story. And that is what motivates me to mm, let the system be the system. I'm not going to play the game anymore. I already know it's broken, so let me just do it myself. And so I went into it very much thinking about, this is the way that it has to be. No one else is going to do it for me. So because I've been writing these poems in particular over the last 5 years, from last summer to November of last year was when I was kind of thinking about, will I self-publish? How will I self-publish? And every December for the last 5 years, I always do 22 days of BJ, which
Mm.
starts December 1st and leads us to December 22nd, which is his birthday. And I share about his life. I share photos of him on my social media. And it was during that time that it really clicked for me, like, okay, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to hit up the cover designers that I know. I'm surrounded by people who are creative. And I really want to lean into that because I do this for other people. And when I see them get their book for the first time and they're like, oh my gosh, like this is not just a Word document anymore. This is something that they can hold and they can, rip out the pages or mark it up. And it's a completely different experience when you're not looking at it on a screen that
Yes.
has this 8.5 by 11 white page that is not telling your story the way that you want it to. So I felt really encouraged actually seeing other writers do it themselves, through me, and design their books. It was just I wondered, how would it feel? And because I have this skill set and I really love designing, it is something that I turn to in the other pendulum side of things. Like I'll write, but then I also love designing because you're just making what people have written very clear on the page. And as a designer, my job is to make sure that the design is not noticeable, that you can encounter the book and only encounter the content. That's where your focus is. And so using all of that, experience and skill to do it myself feels like a tremendous feat that I certainly don't think younger Krystle would have ever imagined that she'd be doing on her own.
Absolutely. No, I love the idea of just sometimes you just have to do it yourself. I'm curious. I mean, you had said you had gone the publisher route, but then you had just realized just in life, you know, screw it. I just need to, you know, screw the system. I mean, how does someone kind of almost reach that blanket off point? Because I can definitely relate, and I'm sure a lot of people listening can relate to where it's just you feel like you're playing, you know, like, quote unquote, playing the game. And then eventually you're just
Mhm.
like, I don't want to play this game anymore. What am I
Yeah.
even gaining off of it? What gave you kind of that confidence to really step out and just uh, publish yourself. I mean, just go out, like you said, you had the credentials, you had the tools, you had the resources. How did you get to that point? I mean, to really just break through like that? What was the kind of leading up to steps, or were there any, or you just woke up one day and said, let's do it?
So it's all of those things. I think that during the process, I was like, "Ah, I don't know, like, is this the right thing?" I mean, I design the way that I design, but it's not the perfect. I mean, I'm sure that there's things I have to learn. But I think that the biggest indicator for me was when you're playing the game and you're told no, but you're not told no for a reason, it really discourages any artist, any kind of person to be told like you're not good enough, your story's not important, we don't like this for our publication. And I think that being told that so many times, I really wanted to almost prove to myself that this story is important. It's important to me. And I know grief is, as kind of the world continues to gain new language and create capacity for topics like this, where it's not, so taboo that we're whispering about how sad we are. To me, this feels bigger than me. And because I had the tools, it's like, I'm ready for this work to kind of have a life of its own. I've been holding it so tight, and there is a part of it that's still my story, but not anymore. Especially since it's been out, it's not my story anymore. It's the world's story, to do with it whatever they will. And I think that part of it was a readiness to let go of trying to keep it all to myself.
Mm.
Because I know that there are the amount of people I have met who have lost siblings blows my mind. Because again, like, no one tells you, no one puts you in on the joke that this is the reality of life. And so just that fact alone, and being able to connect with those grieving siblings, has really helped motivate me to just share. Because so much of what I wanted, especially early on in that grief, was for someone to say, wow, I lost a brother too,
Yeah.
and their name is, like, just wanted to keep them alive. And that, I think, siblings in general in the grief world are often called the forgotten mourners, because when a child dies, usually those who are looked to first are the parents or the grandparents or their children. And so the siblings are just kind of scooped up to the side, and maybe they're okay, maybe they're not okay, but they're not the focal point, and they might not even be a focus at all. And uh I'm not willing to just be in the corner anymore. I'm not willing to be a sibling who doesn't show the world that there is this kind of love that you cannot get from a parent, from a relationship, from friends. That sibling blood connection is so special, and it's worthwhile to keep alive.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're taking me back. Yeah, that is the relationship of a sibling, brother to sister, sister to sister, brother to brother, whatever you want to title it. It is very unique, all in of its own. No, I love that. So kind of speaking to that, tell us a bit about your family's reception to this. I mean, this is such a I wonder, like, for you, I mean, have you really kind of realized the gravity of like how big of, I'm sure, like a moment this is for you? Obviously, it's your debut, but the gravity of what your debut is about. I mean, in tribute to your brother who was taken far too soon, right? What has your family's reception been like to this? I know you just had your, I believe, book release party in LA,
Mhm.
or was it in LA
Yeah,
or was it in
in
Oregon?
Portland. It was in Portland, yeah.
In Portland. I mean, what is your family's reception to this piece been?
My family's been really receptive, and encouraging. I think that poetry, I would say, at least for the elders in my family, they always are like, we don't get it, you're too smart. And recently I had a friend tell me that the book is really accessible.
Mhm.
And I appreciated that, because I don't actually know if my parents have read it. I
Yeah.
know that they've sent me pictures of themselves with it, which I just think is amazing. Just to know that, I mean, my brother's face is on the cover, so I'm not only seeing him with my parents, our parents, but I'm seeing him with anyone who picks up the book and holds it and sends me a picture. And that's really remarkable. And I have the siblings I have on my mom's side, they've all been really supportive, really encouraging. They've been, we have a chat that I send them things all the time, like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? So they have been, my squad that lift me up when I start to feel doubt about myself. They are they're avid social media people, so they're hyping it up on their social media. So I think it's really something that I don't know that I've felt the gravity of it, because sometimes I wonder, like, what impact am I having on especially my younger siblings?
Yes.
Because often my role in the family is like, I'm the problem solver, or you want some advice, you go to Krystle. And so to be this other thing for them, or to have my two youngest siblings join a Zoom and, spend their teenage time on
Yeah.
Zoom watching me read poems, is really, really meaningful.
Yeah.
Because it also affirms to me, not only does BJ matter, which I am dedicated to making sure that that's a reality for all of my family, but I matter too. And I think that I really rely on that internal mantra of, like, if not you, then who? And so it feels a really, like, a special privilege to be able to bring and keep him alive to all of the people who knew and loved him, and also had very complicated relationships with him. I think that's something that my work and my love have never wavered from. Like, he was a full person who had complicated, nuanced, difficult parts of him. And I'm not trying to make excuses for him. I'm just telling the stories that I know to be true, or that I imagine to be true. And I think that that also really helps, or I'm hopeful, I think that it helps people in my family know that, you can be a hard case and still be so loved, and you would absolutely be missed if you were taken too soon.
No, no, absolutely. Tell us a bit about this idea. I want to harken back to poetry and grief. First and
Mhm.
foremost, for you, what is has this almost been a cathartic process that's helped you with your grief? Being able to write this story, being able to write these poems, correlating to prayer for relief. Just that title alone, like some people would even consider poetry a form of casting prayers. You're literally be
Mhm.
writing line by line. Has it brought you some cathartic relief? I mean, has it brought you some ease in your soul, kind of dealing with the grief of your brother passing and his murder?
Yeah, I think that the best word for me is it offers a space to release. I don't think that over the last 5 years anything is better, or, I've learned through this experience, the meaning of life, or the kind of like the trite things that people, maybe it's really real for them. And so I won't discredit that. But for me, that's not a reality. Like, life has not gotten better, or I haven't learned, my purpose because of this. I didn't need this grief to happen for me to get those
Sure.
outcomes. And so for me, poetry is a release. And I have been really fortunate to be in spaces where there have been unflinching ears and eyes to listen and watch me read and cry and struggle and sustain sitting there, as I've written about this for 5 years and will continue to write about it for the rest of my life. That's a really, that part is comforting, is that there are people who are, and I think poetry specifically, at least in my world, allows that space where it's going to be messy and it's going to be complicated. And sometimes the poems don't get you anywhere. And sometimes they take you everywhere. But that there's just this open invitation, and there are open invitations from other writers to sit with it, because as poets or as writers, we all have our thing, whatever our need, write what you know is what they say. And I feel like I really know my grief, but I also really don't. It surprises me sometimes. I find myself in different places after I've started a poem. So I think that what it has done ultimately, not only as a place of relief, but if my therapist one time asked me, what would you be willing to do if you could suffer a little bit less in your grief? And I think that the idea of just suffering less is really helpful and grounding, because what helps me suffer less is writing, and is telling this story, and knowing that I'm going to be I'm committed. I'm all in. That's what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. And I am perfectly content with that because it helps keep me connected. It helps remind me that I love beyond myself or beyond what's right in front of me. It tells me that there are going to be people, more people that I will lose. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to love them less because I'm afraid of losing them. Just means that my ability to love expands and that I'm willing to do that at the risk every day of losing someone.
Mm. Absolutely. Wow. It seems like this has been just such a full circle for you. Well, a full uncompleted circle. Like you said, this is
Right.
life's work for you, something that you'll be doing for the rest of your life. No, thank you so much, Krystle. You're dropping a lot of gems and a lot of wisdom for those that are listening. Um, Now, as we're kind of wrapping up here, I mean, tell me what do you think just spoken word and poetry, what as just a practice do you think, it's obvious you've been able to take so much from it. I mean, just so much from just life experience to now what you've been able to create. What do you think is an important task? What do you think is important that people take away from poetry? It may not be what you've taken away, but what do you think people can truly correlate to? Because, you know, you have people, they're experiencing grief similar to what you're going through, right? And they're finding it through your poetry. They're finding that correlation through your poetry. What do you think people can truly take away? What is so special about the words of poetry?
Mhm. There's so much, but I will keep it short. I think that something that really stands out and specific to this work and really any kind of poetic work is that it offers readers to encounter when they are ready.
Mm,
I think that there are many collections where you can open up and just read one poem and maybe you don't need to read any other poems. And that can resonate, or you can see yourself, or it can be a mirror. And so that's something that I'm hopeful for poetry in general is for everyone who encounters it, is that it's accessible and that you don't have to know all the greats, or you don't have to know the rhyme schemes or the forms, none of that. You just need to find out what is meaningful to you. And that is something that a mentor has shared with me, that question. It used to be, especially in school, like, what does this poem mean? And now I have learned new language to say, what is meaningful to me? And you don't have to understand everything. But asking yourself that question, I think, is really profound and important because, at least in my journey of seeking out words and reading, it's like I just want to connect with something that's beyond me, but still also holds the truth of my own experience. And so when you ask that question, whether it's in poetry or nonfiction, fiction, etc., I think that you can really be held in your experience that otherwise is sometimes unbearable, unholdable, unimaginable.
yeah, absolutely. Being held in your own experience that is absolutely unbearable, which is what the human experience truly is. Unbearable. No, I'm just
That's
kidding.
right.
No, I love that. I absolutely love that. All right, Krystle, we've had such a great time with you today. We've really enjoyed, really appreciate you telling your story with such bravery, confidence, authenticity. A big thank you to you. Now, the last question for you before we wrap up. Krystle, tell me, why do you need to get your words out?
I need to get my words out because I love my brother so much and I really miss him. And I miss what I thought we had as children, the memories that I think that I remember. I miss so much of what we won't be able to experience because he's not here. And when something so profound that is like he's literally the person that I first saw when I opened my eyes at 3 days old is taken from you, it's really hard to fill that space. It's unfillable. So it's really important for me, for everyone to know how much I love him, but also that he was more than the way that he died, that he was a complex and nuanced person, that he is loved, and I'm still searching for him in everything I do and everywhere I go. And I want him to be carried, not only with me, but people who understand or maybe don't understand grief and know that it's messy and complex and unfinished. And whether you're grieving for a week or 100 years, all that really means is that you love what is lost, and for that to be held close and celebrated, because that part of the human experience is never going to change. We're always going to be losing something at some point in our lives.
No.
But because of that, doesn't mean that we should love anything, anyone, any less.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there you have it. All right. Thank you so much, Krystle. Now, again, before we wrap up, tell us what is 2024 and beyond looking like for you and your poetry? Tell us any upcoming events. And lastly, tell us where can we check out all of your phenomenal, amazing work, any websites, social media. Please do tell the folks.
Absolutely. So the next, few months are just trying to get in where I fit in with readings and be in community. I absolutely want to continue to share out the work, and anyone who is willing to have me read, I will happily bring these poems to you. And in the next couple of months, I do have some local Portland readings. All of the information is available on my Instagram, which is at 2K1, or on my website, KrystleMayStatler.com. And for my poetry, I just want to keep writing. I just think, all the time that I'm pouring into getting this book into everyone's hands has been such a wild ride. And I'm also on the heels of, I just want to sit down and write and get to the page and tell another story. I don't know where it's going to lead me, but I just want to continue to do it, because I'm not a one book woman. I think that there are more books here. And that practice and that commitment to writing is something that I feel really passionate about. So I'm excited for really the unknown.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Krystle. She's not a one book woman, everyone. That is the tagline for today's episode. I love that. All right, Krystle, again, big thank you for being on the show today. Everyone, Krystle's links will be down below in the detail box description section. All her links will be there down below, no matter where you listen to this podcast, no matter what the service. Check out the detailed box below for all of Krystle's links. All right, Krystle, a big thank you for coming on the Poet Speaks podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And everyone, check out the Poet Speaks podcast, no matter where you listen to all your podcasts, streaming everywhere. And everyone, again, check out Krystle's amazing work. Big thank you to Krystle. All right, everyone, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.